This is SpaceTime Series 29, Episode 24, for broadcast on the 25th of February 2026. Coming up on SpaceTime, the clearest view yet of the birth of a black hole, a new Martian navigation system for use on the Red Planet, and NASA's SpaceX Crew 12 arrives aboard the International Space Station as the agency approves a sixth private mission to the orbiting outpost. All that and more coming up on SpaceTime. Astronomers have discovered a star collapsing down to form a black hole without the expected blinding blast of a supernova explosion. Back in 2014, a NASA telescope observed infrared emissions coming from a massive star in the Andromeda Galaxy M31, which gradually grew brighter. The star glowed more intensely with infrared light for around 3 years before finally fading dramatically and disappearing, leaving behind a shell of dust. Now, astronomers have determined what they witnessed was a star collapsing and giving birth to a stellar mass black hole. The study's lead author, Kishale D. from Columbia University, says this is an event astronomers had anticipated for decades, but have had limited convincing observational evidence for until now. The findings, reported in the journal Science, show a star undergoing direct collapse, turning into a black hole, without first exploding and becoming a supernova, long believed to be a common method for high-mass stars to become black holes. The progenitor star was a huge hydrogen-depleted supergiant named M31 2014 DS1, located some 2.5 million light-years away. When newly formed, this star was around 13 times the mass of our Sun. But at the time of its death, it would have been closer to 5 solar masses, having shed most of its mass through powerful stellar winds during its life. D says the dramatic and sustained fading of the star was very unusual and suggests a supernova failed to occur, leading to the collapse of the star's core directly into a black hole. Now, stars with this sort of mass have long been assumed to always explode as supernovae. The fact that it didn't suggests that stars with this sort of mass range may or may not successfully explode, possibly due to how gravity, gas pressure and powerful shock waves interact in chaotic ways with each other inside the dying star. The manner in which the star turned into a black hole suggests that at the end of its life, its inner core wasn't pushed out in a normal supernova explosion, instead undergoing a complete inward collapse. Now, this process of direct collapse to form a black hole may have been seen at least once before. It was back in 2010 in the galaxy NGC 6946, which is about 10 times further away than this star. But the exact nature of that event was unclear and hotly debated in astronomical circles because it was 100 times fainter and there wasn't enough high-quality data available about it. Now, astronomers have long known that stellar mass black holes are caused by the death of massive stars. Black holes were first theorized more than 50 years ago, and today we know of dozens in our own galaxy and hundreds of others detected from gravitational wave observations across the distant universe. However, scientists still have no clear consensus on which stars turn into black holes and how that process plays out. This discovery provides the clearest insights yet into this and indicates that this kind of stellar collapse may happen more often than scientists had previously thought. The authors discovered the star by analysing archival data from NASA's NEOWISE mission. They used a prediction from the 1970s that theorised that when a star underwent direct collapse, it would leave behind a faint infrared glow caused by the dying gasp of the star shedding its outer layers and becoming enshrouded in dust. So they conducted the largest study of variable infrared sources ever carried out, tracking every star in the Milky Way and other local galaxies to try and search out for these events. And eventually they came across M31 2014 DS1. Further analysis showed that this star fitted their predictions perfectly. D says unlike finding a supernova, which is easy because supernovae outshine the galaxies they're in for weeks at a time, finding individual stars that disappear without producing an explosion is incredibly difficult. So it comes as a shock that a massive star basically disappeared without an explosion, and nobody noticed it for more than 5 years. It impacts science's entire understanding of the inventory of massive stellar deaths in the universe. And it says there are things that may be quietly happening out there that are easily going unnoticed. This is SpaceTime. Still to come, NASA trials a new Martian navigation system on the Red Planet. And a new crew arrives aboard the International Space Station as NASA approves a 6th private mission to the orbiting outpost. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. This podcast is brought to you by Squarespace. If you want to look polished online without any headaches, Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform that helps you claim your domain, build a beautiful site, showcase what you do, and get paid, all from the one place. I guess you could think of Squarespace sort of like a tidy roommate for your business. It handles all the scheduling crumbs, the unpaid invoices under the couch, and actually answers the door when customers knock. Squarespace's Blueprint A1 will sketch a fully customized site for you based on a few simple questions: industry, personality, goals, and then hand you a polished copy and layout to tweak. And yes, people will actually find you. Squarespace's built-in SEO tools, that's meta description, auto sitemaps, and clean structure, help your site show up where it matters. So why not try it for free at squarespace.com/spacetime. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code SpaceTime to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/spacetime. And remember, you'll find the links in our show notes. Squarespace.com/spacetime and the promo code SpaceTime. NASA has developed a new Martian navigation system, allowing its Mars Perseverance rover to pinpoint its location to within 25 centimeters. Imagine you're all alone, driving along a rocky, unforgiving desert with no roads, no map, no GPS, and nothing more than a single phone call once a day for someone far away telling you where you are. Well, that's what the car-sized 6-wheel Perseverance rover's been experiencing ever since landing on the Red Planet almost exactly 5 years ago this month. Although it carries time-tested tools for determining its general location, the rover's always needed mission managers back on Earth to tell it precisely where it is, until now. A new technology developed by NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, will now allow Perseverance to figure out its whereabouts without needing to phone home for help. Called Mars Global Localization, the technology features an algorithm that rapidly compares panoramic images from the rover's navigation cameras with on-board orbital terrain maps. Running on a powerful processor that Perseverance originally used to communicate with the Ingenuity Mars helicopter, the algorithm takes about 2 minutes to pinpoint the rover's location to within 25 centimeters. Mission managers first used the Mars Global Localization technology in successful mission operations on February the 2nd, then again on February the 16th. JPL's Chief Engineer of Robotics Operations, Vandy Verma, says it's kind of like giving the rover GPS. It means Perseverance will be able to drive for much longer distances autonomously, thereby allowing more of the planet to be explored and more science to be gathered. The upgrade's especially valuable given how well Perseverance's auto-navigation self-driving system's been working. AutoNav enables the rover to replan its path around obstacles along its way in order to reach its pre-established destination. It's already proven so capable that the distance Perseverance can drive without instructions from Earth is largely now only limited by the rover's uncertainty about its exact location. The implementation of Mars Global Localization comes on the heels of another innovation from Perseverance mission managers. That is, the first use of generative artificial intelligence to help plan a drive route by selecting waypoints for the rover, which are normally chosen by human rover operators. Unlike on Earth, there are no GPS satellites in deep space to locate spacecraft on planetary surfaces. So, missions, whether robotic or manned, need to come up with other ways to determine their location. Now, as with NASA's previous Mars rovers, Perseverance tracks its position using what's called visual odometry, analysing geologic features in camera images taken every few metres while accounting for wheel slippage. But as tiny errors in this process add up over the course of each drive, the rover becomes increasingly unsure about its exact location. Now, on long drives, that means the rover's sense of its position could be out by as much as 35 metres. Believing it may be too close to hazardous terrain, Perseverance then prematurely may end its drive and wait for fresh instructions from Earth. Verma says under those circumstances, people have to tell it, "You're not lost, you're safe, keep going." Scientists knew that if they could address this problem, the rover could travel much further every day. After each drive comes to a halt, the rover sends a 360-degree panorama to Earth, where mapping experts match the imagery with shots of the Martian surface taken by NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter spacecraft. Mission managers then send the rover its location and instructions what to do next. Now that process can take a day or more, but with the new Mars Global Localization technology, the rover is now able to compare images itself, determine its exact location, and roll ahead on its pre-planned route. Key to Mars Global Localization is the rover's helicopter base station, which Perseverance used to communicate with the now retired Ingenuity Mars helicopter. Equipped with an off-the-shelf commercial processor of the type fitted to mid-2010 era smartphones, the technology can run over 100 times faster than the rover's two main computers, which were specially developed to survive the radiation-heavy Martian environment and are based on hardware introduced back in 1997. As a technology demonstration designed to test capabilities, the Ingenuity mission was able to risk employing more powerful commercial chips in the helicopter base station and on the rotocopter itself, even though they hadn't been proven in the space environment. It was a gamble, but it paid off, with Ingenuity undertaking 72 flights compared to the 5 test flights it was originally planned to undertake. Now, apart from the Mars Perseverance rover, this new technology could also find its way onto the Moon, where lighting conditions and long cold lunar nights make knowing exactly where a spacecraft's located all the more crucial. This report from NASA TV.
Using a new technology called Mars Global Localization, the rover can now pinpoint its location without asking humans for help. Here's how it works. Perseverance takes panoramic images and turns it into a bird's eye view. Then, an onboard algorithm rapidly compares those images to terrain maps from an orbiting spacecraft and determines the rover's precise location. The key to this quick computing is a processor Perseverance originally used to communicate with the Ingenuity Mars helicopter. Now, it's helping Perseverance keep moving confidently. And global localization isn't the only recent innovation. The team has started to use generative AI to help plan the rover's driving path by creating waypoints for Mars. By leveraging decades of Mars knowledge and the latest advancements in technology, the rover will be able to drive for much longer distances autonomously. So we'll explore more of the planet and get more science.
This is SpaceTime. Still to come, NASA's SpaceX Crew 12 arrives aboard the International Space Station as the agency approves a new private mission, the 6th, to the orbiting outpost. And later in the science report, a new study warns that overfishing may be one of the key reasons for reef-munching crown-of-thorn starfish outbreaks on the Great Barrier Reef. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. NASA's SpaceX Crew 12 Dragon capsule has successfully docked with the International Space Station, returning the orbiting outpost complement back up to its usual 7 crew members. The crew of 2 Americans, a Russian and a Frenchman, blasted off a day earlier aboard a Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Base in Florida. The Dragon spacecraft Freedom docked autonomously with the space-facing zenith port of the station's Harmony module. Crew 12 will now form part of the Expedition 7475 crew, undertaking some 250 scientific experiments in orbit. These will include studying pneumonia-causing bacteria to improve cardiovascular treatments, on-demand intravenous fluid generation for future space missions, and research into how physical characteristics may affect blood flow during long-duration spaceflight. Other experiments include automated plant health monitoring and investigating plant and nitrogen-fixing microbe interactions to enhance food production in space. The International Space Station has been undermanned for about a month following the early return to Earth of NASA's SpaceX Crew 11 mission due to a medical emergency involving one of the astronauts. Meanwhile, NASA's just approved a new private astronaut mission to the International Space Station slated for later next year. The 14-day mission for the company VAST will undertake research designed to gain new insights into the infrastructure and processes that will be needed to support VAST's own human spaceflight missions, which include building their own space station in low Earth orbit called Haven in 2027. Plans suggest Haven will be about the size of a truck, with additional modules added in future years, with the outpost becoming permanently manned by 2030. VAST's looking at research proposals on biology, biotechnology, physical sciences, human research and technology demonstrations. VAST used SpaceX to launch the small Haven demo spacecraft into orbit last year. The other big private company that's been flying people into space and to the International Space Station is Axiom, which has undertaken 4 missions to the orbiting outpost. As well as developing NASA's Artemis spacesuits, Axiom Space is also developing their own commercial space station. Its initial modules will be attached to the existing International Space Station before becoming an independent free-flying platform when the International Space Station is retired in 2030. Axiom plan to use their space station to undertake microgravity research, various commercial endeavours and space tourism. This is SpaceTime. And time now to take another brief look at some of the other stories making news in science this week with a science report. A new study warns that people who are exposed to more air pollution are also far more likely to face a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. The findings, reported in the journal PLOS Medicine, looked at how much air pollution some 27.8 million people aged 65 and over were exposed to over an 18-year period. They found that people who had a greater exposure to air pollution were also far more likely to develop Alzheimer's than those who avoided air pollution. And the authors found the link was also stronger for people who had experienced a stroke. However, they found no additional effect in people with high blood pressure or with depression. Marine biologists are warning that overfishing may be the primary cause of reef-munching crown of thorns starfish outbreaks. The findings, reported in the journal Current Biology, found a reduction in the number of predatory fish due to overfishing is causing a population explosion in the carnivorous starfish. The authors compared various areas of the Great Barrier Reef that have either banned fishing, have limited it, or have no restrictions on it. They found in areas that banned fishing there was a 2.8 to 3.6 times higher chance of crown of thorns being eaten by predatory fish. The authors say the elevated risk of the spiny critters in no fishing reserves is directly attributable to a single species of snapper known as the Spangled Emperor, which has some 6.3 times greater biomass in no fishing areas versus those areas where fishing is allowed. Scientists say glass could be the future of long-term data storage for human knowledge and record keeping. Current data preservation techniques, such as tapes and hard drives, tend to degrade within a few years or decades, and are therefore unreliable for long-term storage. However, by using lasers to encode data onto glass, data could withstand moisture, temperature changes, and electromagnetic interference for centuries. A report in the journal Nature claims the system can store 4.8 terabytes of data in a 12 by 12 centimetre glass sheet with a shelf life of up to 10,000 years, even if stored at high temperatures. Google have finally launched the new Pixel 10a smartphone, which one must admit is strikingly similar to the earlier Pixel 9a. With the details, we're joined by technology editor Alex Zaharov-Reut from Tech Advice Start Life.
Yeah, this is the Pixel 10a. So this is the lower cost version of Google's Pixel phones. They normally have the regular Pixel 10 and the 10 Pro and also the 10 Pro XL, which is a larger version. And then around about this time every year, they launch the A version, which is their more affordable version. So this one is $849 Australian, obviously less in US dollars, but it competes against all those phones that are $500 or less, which generally are not terribly great phones. I mean, they'll do what you want them to do. They'll do maps, they'll do messaging, they'll do various things. But if you try and push them with games or just try and, do lots of video editing or whatever it might be, they're clearly not going to be as performant as the major devices. And that's where the Pixel 10a and also the iPhone 16e and the forthcoming 17e, which we'll talk about in a moment, come in as almost flagship phones under $1,000. Now, the one thing that is interesting this year is that whilst the 10 and 10 Pro have the Tensor G5 chip, the 10A this year does not. It has the G4, which is a bit unusual because normally, you would be putting the latest chip. But clearly in an era where memory, storage, and even the space to make processors or more expensive processors on production lines is heavily impacted by all of the GPUs and AI in data centers, most of which actually hasn't been built yet. It's sort of been pre-ordered to fulfill demand that it's theoretically supposed to be there.
There's finally a date for the Apple premiere?
Yeah, so this is March 4th in New York. They'll also be holding events in Singapore and London. This is where we're meant to hear about iPhone's 17e, which in theory will have the same chip that is in the iPhone 17 range. But normally there's one core less for some reason. It's like a binned chip. One of the graphics cores or one of the cores is not there. So it enables Apple to use these chips, which still have great power, but in their cheapest device. $999 in Australia is what the 16e sells for. I expect the price will be the same. But more importantly, we are expecting to also see the new MacBook. Supposedly 12-inch screen, so small. I mean, I've heard people say 13-inch, but effectively this will sell presumably in the US for about $599. We're yet to find out. Supposedly it only has 8 gig of RAM instead of 16, which you would think is not enough as you would have on the 16 gig devices that can better run Apple Intelligence, although we're still waiting for the next generation of Siri. But this will be a low-cost Mac running an iPhone chip. With iPhone chips, very powerful. I mean, the latest chips are as good as or better than the M1 from 5 years ago, and that's still a great computer. I have an M1 with 8 gig of RAM and a 512 gig SSD, and it's running everything that my M2 with 24 gigabytes of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD can run. So if Apple does that, it will mean greater competition for the school dollar, where you've got Chromebooks and you've got iPads and tablets, but it'll also give people a cheaper Mac to go for, and then once they start using it, they can aspire to better. But it will be certainly better than any Windows PC that is in the $500 to $1,000 market. It will just be a vastly better device with all the advantages of the Macs.
Price of hard drives are going up.
The cost of these things are going up, and Western Digital has reported, or it's been reported online, that it has sold its entire 2026 allocation of disks to data centers. I mean, I presume there's still obviously disks in the channel for consumers, but it sold its entire 2026 contingent, and apparently it sold part of its 2027 and 2028 contingent as well. So the need for hardware and electricity to power it is paramount. If anything's going to slow down the AI revolution, it's going to be not having enough of these drives and memory and other GPUs components. But I guess the companies buying them up in such volume are making sure that the data center guys will be okay, but it's consumers and businesses that will suffer with higher prices.
That's Alex Zaharov-Reutt from TechAdvice.life. And this is SpaceTime. And that's the show for now. SpaceTime is available every Monday, Wednesday and Friday through Bytes.com, SoundCloud, YouTube, your favourite podcast download provider, and from SpaceTimeWithStuartGary.com. SpaceTime's also broadcast through the National Science Foundation on Science Zone Radio and on both iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. And you can help to support our show by visiting the SpaceTime store for a range of promotional merchandising goodies, or by becoming a SpaceTime patron, which gives you access to triple-episode commercial-free versions of the show, as well as lots of bonus audio content which doesn't go to air, access to our exclusive Facebook group, and other rewards. Just go to SpaceTimeWithStuartGary.com for full details.
You've been listening to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary. This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.